I cannot guarantee his safety.
Understood.
Nor will I be responsible for his fate.
For opening weekend of The Hobbit, John and I and a bunch of TYT people made a trek over to the theater to check it out, and we wanted to give you our first impressions.
I think that Martin Freeman it was amazing as Bilbo. Gandalf,
So they were right to wait that long to get him in the cast.
I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, because before Peter Jackson had said Martin Freeman was his only choice for Bilbo, and they had to wait for him to finish filming Sherlock for him to come in and film
I
this
think that he
role.
was great. But I would say that outside of the Dwarven Prince, there's not a whole lot of personality given to the dwarves. I mean, necessarily. There's 13 of them. So in terms of how attached I feel to the characters, it's not yet at the level of Lord of the Rings, because you don't have like a Frodo and a Sam and an Aragorn and a Boromir and a Legolas and a Gimli. But maybe 2 movies in, 3 movies in,
So
I'll be like,
to
oh,
you,
you remember
they're
that time
still,
Bomber
like,
did this?
A bunch of bearded dudes.
For the most part. I think Tilly and Philly were both cool, because they
Yeah.
look different at least.
Well, they look like they're
human. They're more human
uncle,
dwarves.
The king, right?
Exactly, yeah. Anyway, what did you think of the movie?
I thought it was really good. I don't know, it just seemed like certain scenes went on longer than they should have. There are scenes that were supposed to be long, like when Bilbo was talking to Smeagol Gollum, doing the riddles.
Yeah.
That was a long scene.
Yeah.
But it should have been long.
Yeah, it's one of the most important, it's certainly
Yes.
one of the most impactful scenes in terms of the effect it'll have on the world later on. And also it's an iconic scene. When you think of The Hobbit, that's the scene you think of. So I'm glad that they put as much time into it as they did. Are we going to throw to
We
Steve?
have a special guest.
I feel that he is waiting to talk.
Presents we sent. So you may think the biggest nerd at TYT may be me, maybe John, but you would be wrong. It's actually COO Steve-O. And he's a big fan of Lord of the Rings. Aren't you, Steve?
I am. I didn't realize I was the biggest nerd in this whole company. That's a little embarrassing, but I am the most Asian, so I guess that makes sense.
Oh. Why you gotta throw me under the bus?
Yes, I'm a big fan of the books. I read The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings many times, and The Silmarillion, and giant nerd, giant geek.
So what did you think of The Hobbit?
You know what? I love The Hobbit. I thought it was really, really well done. I didn't mind the length at all. I did mind the 48 frames per second, because whenever they were panning and there was a kind of an action scene, it looked blurry. It didn't look good at all. But overall, the storyline I thought was terrific. It was very faithful to the book, and what additions they did inject into the movie, I thought was a real positive.
So specifically, if you had to say something that was added that was not from the book was great or a welcome addition, what would you say that would be?
I really like the backstory on Radagast. Well, I mean, his whole character development. He's not much mentioned in the books. There's like a passing acknowledgement that there is a brown wizard who is with the animals. But here, they really kind of fleshed out the character and gave him a lot more play than he got in the books. I also really liked the insertion of Galadriel, the character.
Yeah,
played
she wasn't
by,
in that book, right?
I don't think she was, and in all the books she's barely mentioned. But you know,
They need a female.
they do.
They did need one woman at least.
Yeah. So in the Lord of the Rings, they had Liv Tyler playing Arwen, and both Arwen and Galadriel are probably mentioned total of 4 sentences in all the books combined.
You
Yeah,
really liked the
exactly.
Radagast edition. Did it make you curious to see what the Blue Wizards might be like?
Yes. The Blue Wizards, they never even mentioned them in the books, so that would be a complete fabrication on Jackson's part.
Would that be too far?
No, I would like to see where a true fan of the books like Peter Jackson will take it, and whatever direction he takes it, I'm good with it. But what I really liked was also the backstory on how the mines fell.
Yeah.
The Dwarf Kingdom. I really liked the swords that they were using. Well, the swords that they found, the elven blades, and the fact that they went through and told you the names of the swords and their backstory.
I think it's outstanding that every elf can recognize every sword by name and know its history.
It's an important part of history, I guess.
It's incredible.
Yeah, they're
the
magical
most
swords.
important ones. and that the most important swords happen to just be laying on the ground in a troll hole.
There are a lot of messages in the book that I think Jackson extrapolated from the writings of Tolkien, which I thought were terrific. I mean, Tolkien's main thrust in all of his writings is that people, even those with good intentions, to assert their will over others for good, they usually wind up doing it for bad reasons ultimately. So, for example, I mean, it's a very old biblical tale. So Satan, I guess,
Are you talking about
initially.
Saruman?
Yeah, well, but in the Bible, like Satan, I think initially was a good angel. He was very powerful, and he thought things should be done a certain way, which he thought was better. But ultimately, it became a selfish motive. But it happens in the entire creation of the Middle Earth, fable. People are always trying to do things for the good of others. That's what they think. But when they assert their will on others, they wind up doing it for evil reasons, and they always overreach. And the dwarfs are the same thing. Peter Jackson, a couple of very liberal messages like,
Ooh, tell me about those.
well, in the scene when Galadriel asks, why the halfling? Gandalf says, it's because I don't know. It gives me hope and confidence. And he makes a point that you don't always have to be a big, strong, brave, badass
I
to
liked
fight
that
evil.
line. I didn't, it just really stuck out to me that it was just, I think he said everyday acts of goodness, right? As opposed to grand acts.
Yeah, just little things that you do.
Well, actually, those exact lines weren't necessarily not in the book, but that theme is certainly in the book. And, the difference is that, because hobbits are not fighters, but the hobbits made the biggest contributions to this whole battle against Sauron and the powers of evil. Frodo and Bilbo, these guys, through their soft and gentle ways, made a big contribution. And that's a message for all of us. We can all do good things, right? We can all help fight against the dark powers.
So do you think this is more of a film made for diehard fans than maybe someone just jumping in right now?
I think that it
we
is, and
had
I think it
talked
should be.
before about the marketing campaign for this with the singing, and I said, "Oh, the singing's a bad choice. Don't sing. Just do fighting scenes." But it seems like that would be more accurate to what this film is giving you.
I actually found the fight scenes the worst part of the movie.
Really? Why?
Why?
Well, when they were fighting the orcs, that was fine. But when they were fighting the goblins inside the mountain, it was comical. I mean,
Were you distracted by the king's chin?
well, that was problematic. I mean, it was the return of the Jabba the Hutt's little brother. But I didn't like how these 13 dwarves and Gandalf can fight 17,000 goblins, and they're running down these little rickety
Those ladders.
and they use like a giant stick to just like knock 15 goblins off at a time.
I thought that
Then
was
they go
awesome.
falling down, thousands of feet, and no one gets injured or killed. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's a comic. I mean, I felt like I was watching a scene out of the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. It was goofy.
If this were based on a work, this work were written closer to today,
Yeah.
there'd be a lot more deaths.
Bomber would have had his fat belly sliced open.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah,
But
you probably
since
would
it
have.
is-
But this was written a long time ago.
And
It's
it's
not a
written for
modern
a
fantasy movie.
younger subset. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Although the modern subset probably wouldn't have gotten through the entire 2 hours and 45 minutes. Or
maybe
whatever.
not.
Yeah. But anyway, I very much enjoyed it. I would have
So,
sat through 3 more
Steve
hours.
and John, compared with the other films, where does this rank for you? Is it up high or low?
That's a great question. I would say it's probably right on par, but I just generally like the story in the Lord of the Rings trilogy better than the Hobbit story. So I would say Lord of the Rings is better, but the Hobbit is very, very close. And it's very close only because it was so long and only because they added all the backstory and all those additional features. If it was just the story of the Hobbit, it's not nearly as good and complex as the Lord of the Rings.
The story is different in that in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, you have sort of people against this apocalyptic threat. Whereas the quest that they're on in The Hobbit is very much about people helping people. Like, they could not go and try to get back their home. But for me, the stakes are lower, certainly, but that makes the sacrifice that they're willing to make for each other all the more significant, because they're not throwing their life away to save the world. They're potentially throwing their life away to help their friends, which is a different sort of thing. But I find it very appealing. What's your reaction to it in comparison to the others?
I like fighting the big bad rather than help your friends.
Really?
And I don't know what that says about me.
You don't have that loyalty, that innate honor that
Maybe not yet.
can't be dissuaded even by the
I'm
potentiality
still
of
on
Dragonfire.
that journey,
Yeah, I guess.
John.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that that's a good question to throw to the audience, though. I assume most of the people watching this have probably seen The Hobbit or are thinking about it. So if you have seen it, how do you think it compares to your expectations for the movie, but also to the 3 movies that came before it? And if you haven't seen it, go see it and let us know.